morning. So I'm Charlene Randall, Vice President of Business Development here at L&E Research, and I just want to welcome those of you who are able to join us here in person, as well as all of you who are able to join us remotely through L&E Research's video streaming. L&E Research sponsors educational workshops on a wide variety of topics that we offer out to our clients and our friends complimentary. Well, last fall we did one of our workshops was on writing better questionnaires, and we had such good feedback on it that we just decided that we would go ahead and do a second workshop on the same topic. So today's workshop is actually entitled Writing Shorter Questionnaires, Save Money and Get Better Data. So we are thrilled at the overwhelming response that we have gotten. We actually had a record number of people that registered to sign up for this particular workshop. So more registrants than we've had on any of our other workshops. So we're excited about that. We are hosting our workshop today from our Raleigh, North Carolina location. L&E Research does have focus group facilities in a number of other locations, including Baltimore, Maryland, Charlotte, North Carolina, Cincinnati, Ohio, Columbus, Ohio, Tampa, Florida, St. Louis, Missouri. We have actually two in St. Louis. Charlotte. So, and Charlotte, North Carolina. Did I say that? Okay, got it. Okay. So, but we are, L&E Research is just proudly for 30 years has been supporting companies and their researchers with their marketing research, recruiting, and facility needs. So we have a lot of information to cover today. David's got a lot of really helpful information to share. So as a result, we're not going to have a question and answer survey at the end of this particular session, but if you have any questions, please email those into events@leresearch.com. Again, that's events@leresearch.com, and someone will get back with you with some answers. So at this time, and one more thing, we are going to be recording this session. We are recording it. So if you would like to go back later and just review it as a nice refresher, or you want to share it with some of your colleagues, the link to this recording will be available on our website in about 2 to 3 weeks. So without further delay, I'd like to introduce you to David F. Harris, our guest speaker for today. And David is a leader in the field of questionnaires and qualitative research. He conducts training and consulting on questionnaire design and research planning. With over 20 years experience with positions that include Director of Research Methods at GlaxoSmithKline and Head of Marketing, Insights and Analytics at MERS North America. David has learned how to get better information for decision making while saving money all at the same time. He is the author of The Complete Guide to Writing Questionnaires, How to Get Better Information for Better Decisions. This book is available on Amazon.com as well as leading bookstores. So David received his BA from Reed College in Portland, Oregon, and his MA in Quantitative Psychology from the prestigious L.L. Thurston Psychometric Laboratory at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. That's a mouthful. So without further delay, I'd like to introduce you to David. David, you can take it over.
Yeah, thank you very much. I should just change that to UNC. So as Charlene said, a lot of the material comes from the book I wrote and a lot of the work that I've done over the past 20 years. So I'm going to start with just a discussion of how questionnaire length affects cost and data quality. Then I'm going to go into really the importance of just writing good questions that make sense to people. There are 3 ideas I want to get across I hope everybody comes away with. One is we need to replace questionnaire design speak with just regular conversation. I mean, our questionnaires should feel like a conversation to people. Number 2, it's like marriage. We need to talk, right? When we design questionnaires, it's so important for us to talk to each other, not email each other back and forth, talk about what information we need, not write questions. And we need to spend some time talking with respondents, do qualitative work first, then do pretesting. And then the third idea is just questionnaire design needs to be treated as a professional discipline like we do law. I mean, we hire lawyers to write our legal documents because they have years of training. this idea of just having anybody write a questionnaire just doesn't make sense. I mean, I was thinking just yesterday, how many companies would have just anybody write the PR statement that's going to go out? No, I mean, and we need to raise the level for questionnaire design. And I'm going to talk about the framework for writing shorter and better questionnaires that I present in the book. Survey length and data quality, it's been studied and studied and studied. And basically, somewhere after 10, 12, 15 minutes, the quality of data just starts to go down. I mean, people drop out of surveys. They do this thing called satisficing. If you don't know that term, satisficing means I did just enough to get by, right? If you ever ask somebody to clean up the kitchen and you go in there and look, there's some satisficing going on in there, right? So they just check an answer or two. And then people make up answers. The point that I'm trying to get across to anybody I ever work with is that respondents are only going to give you so much time and energy. You are parachuting, right? You only have so much that you're going to get from people. I ask you, how many of us take 35-minute surveys? We drop out, right? And so this idea of let's just ask some more things, has its costs. Well, speaking of costs, survey length and costs. If you go from a 15 to a 30-minute survey, you're adding about a third to the cost. I mean, it's everything from recruiting, hosting, honoraria, analysis time, et cetera, et cetera. So this idea of getting a shorter questionnaire that gives you better data and costs less seems like a great idea, right? Why do a $60,000 study when you can do a $45,000 study and get better data? Or the 130, cut that back by about 30,000 and save $33,000. I mean, it only makes sense. The quality of the questionnaire really matters. That adds to survey length. It adds to people dropping out when we have questions that are unclear, unanswerable, too difficult, and biased. And I'm going to show you some questions soon. And it ends up in the same thing. Costs go up and the quality of the responses go down. If you've heard me talk before, you've seen this example. This is people's favorite, so I'm going to do it again. Here's a question that we think is pretty simple, right? How many cars do you own? And so if you were really pretesting this question and you asked the person to think aloud as he answered it, he might say, our son's off at college. He's got a car. I'm not really sure if you want me to count that. I actually drive a truck. Do you mean cars, or do you mean actual cars, or just vehicles that we drive? And my wife, she leases a car. We don't technically own it. I'm not sure if you want me to count that. I really don't know what you want, so I'm just going to give you a 1. That's a pretty simple question. And you can clean it up, and you can make it a lot better, but it requires questionnaire design writing skills. But notice we talked to the respondent. Remember that theme? Let's talk to the respondent. We found out a lot there, and so that gives us a clue as to how to fix that up. The problems, you is often misinterpreted. Does that mean the whole family? In a physician's office, does it mean the whole practice? People answer differently. And those concepts of cars and ownership need to be cleaned up to make the question really work. Here's a question. It's so common. If I had a nickel for every time I saw a question like this, I'd be enormously wealthy. When determining which automobile to purchase, were you at least 50% involved in the research that led to your final selection? That seems like a pretty reasonable question, doesn't it? It's actually not. There's a mismatch between the question stem and the response choices. Up top, it's saying, were you 50% involved in the research? The question stem, are you the primary decision maker? See, those are two different things. And so when people get to these questions, they're often just kind of giving you an answer, making up something because it really doesn't make sense. So, how we write these questions matter. The idea of questionnaire design being a professional discipline matters. That's a simple guideline. the match between the stem and the response choices. So here's one more. Please rate your overall technical knowledge on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 means I'm very technically advanced and always have the latest gadgets, and 1 means I cannot operate a personal computer. So fine, I see the scale, whatever. One end of the scale, I'm very technically advanced and I always have the latest gadgets. Which one is it? I don't really always have the latest gadgets, but I'm pretty technically advanced. But in what area, right? Let's look at the other end of the scale. I cannot operate a personal computer. I'm sorry, my shading got off a little bit. I'm not really sure why, but. So here again is a question that's really unclear. Remember I said talk to each other? If I were talking to my client and we were putting together this, I'd say, what do we really need to measure? Is it a simple metric of, do you think you're pretty technically advanced? Maybe we just ask a simple question like that. And then the person gets to the scale, they don't really know what to do. The survey response goes from comprehension, retrieval, judgment, response. Comprehension, what are they really asking? Cars, vehicles, I'm not really sure. Retrieval, what information really matters in the past 30 days? How many emails have you yourself deleted? I don't know. Judgment, what information is relevant? Do I add the kid? Response, okay, that 1 to 10 scale, how do I get my technically whatever, and what number do I choose? So these things are harder than it may seem. I've been playing around with this idea of avoiding questionnaire design speak. And I call that a dialect that's developed in the late 20th and early 21st century. And that's unfortunate, where everybody thinks they can write questions. So it's where somebody says, oh, ask what % of your most recently purchased individually packaged food items are your priority choice. I mean, people ask me that all the time. I see it written down all the time. What does that really mean? No one really talks that way. So again, if I were talking to a client, I would say, what do you really want to know? And these terms are probably not ones that we use when we talk to each other. I've never asked anybody about individually packaged food items. So I might say, which of these do you like the most? Which of these do you buy the most? Or something like that. But the key is to really talk to each other about the information needed, not how to ask questions. And when we develop our questionnaire design skills as a professional discipline, we go from what information do you need to here are a few ways that we could get that. Okay, here's another question. And I'm doing this because everyone says they love examples. Which of the following best describes your role in purchasing food to be eaten at home? Well, I'm going to pick on role in purchasing. Now, my role in purchasing might include paying for it. It might include picking it up, going to the grocery store. I don't really know. Food to be eaten at home. Does that include takeout? We do that probably twice a week, or I don't know. A couple of times a month we have pizza delivered. So I'm not sure what they're asking about. Notice the first item down there says I'm the primary food shopper. So if we're talking to our clients about about the information they need, as opposed to having them email us questions, the client might say, we need to find out who's doing the grocery shopping, right? So why not ask it this way? This is how you talk to somebody. Who does most of the grocery shopping for your household? You, someone else in your household? You and someone else share equally. I mean, you just look at the first question, look at the second question. The second question's conversational. It just makes so much more sense. It makes it much easier to answer and get better data. I argue that writing questionnaires is one of the most challenging forms of writing. It's a conversation between you and hundreds, usually thousands of diverse respondents. It may take 15, 30, or 45 minutes. Every single question has to be written so that every single respondent knows exactly what you're asking about. They can recall an answer, and they're willing to give it to you without bias. And unlike just talking to people, you're not there to clarify ambiguities when they say, I'm not really sure what you mean by car. Fortunately, there's a 75-year history of really good scientific and intellectual work on how to write questions. And it's out of Michigan, Chicago, Washington State, 20 other universities. APOR, I put their journal up there. It's just, I don't know, that hadn't made its way into private industry as much as it should. And part of my challenge was to do my Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours and try and put together a book that made all that stuff simpler so that people don't have to spend 10,000 hours going through all that. So I put together in the book a framework for writing questionnaires, because if you read the literature, there are 200 guidelines out there, and I don't think they're very well organized. So for people like us in commercial settings, it always starts with planning research to support decision making, right? Because that's why we do things, because we want to improve customer satisfaction. We want to figure out which line extension that we need to cancel, if we need to cancel one or come out with one, which package design to use. We do qualitative research first and then plan the questionnaire. Then when it comes to writing questions, the guidelines fell into 4 categories: how to make them clear, answerable, easy, and unbiased. So that helps us keep track of these guidelines. It was probably a year and a half into writing the book, I realized there were 3 tasks we asked of respondents. We asked them to select from a list, rate things on a scale, answer open-ended questions. And there's certain guidelines that are really specific to those tasks. And then there's pretesting the questionnaire. It's something that's hardly ever done like it should be. And that's where you actually sit down with respondents. You walk through the questionnaire and you use qualitative skills to find out how that's all working. So here's the talk to each other part. And I emphasize that because we don't need our colleagues are not questionnaire writers. So have them tell us, what do you really want to know from this? What's going to really help you guys decide what you're going to do next? And we do that when we plan research, we do that when we do qualitative work, we do that when we plan the questionnaire. And then the talking to respondents, it's this doing qualitative work first, so critical, and then pretesting the questionnaire. And you know how those questionnaires are, where we never talk to respondents. They're like, it's a stab in the dark how to phrase the questions. And so often we're asking the wrong questions. So if I were to say what are the top 3 things to saving money and getting better data, 1, it's plan research to support decision making. This is given so much lip service in the industry. It's hard to do. Once you learn how to do it, it gets so much better. I always start with clients and I say, when this study's done, what are you guys really hoping to find? What are you hoping you'll be able to do when this is done? And very often there, I find out, oh my gosh, we're making decisions about targeting, or we're making decisions about positioning. The reason why this is a big money saver is that when you design a survey and you're getting a bunch of information, at what point do you say, oh, stop, that's enough? Well, you want to get the information that's used for decision making. Most decisions are made based on 3 to 7 pieces of key information. I use this technique. I write this down. If people are comfortable doing this, then I show this to them. But we will decide. We will decide which messages to put on the package. We will decide which package design to use. We will decide whether this group is a viable target market. And then what information do you need? Let's talk to each other about that to make that decision. Just tossing this out here. These are what I call the 5 key decisions marketers make. They're around what benefit do we offer, who's our target market or target segmentation, how do we position our product, what story do we tell, messages, creative, et cetera, to establish the positioning, how do we deliver it, how do we get it to them. And this helps in that consulting exercise because we're able to play around with different decisions and sometimes get decisions in there like the delivery. Maybe that wasn't really in it, but we're figuring out targeting. But wow, let's figure out how we can get this message to the right target. So this is just something I do in workshops. What are your key decisions over the next 12 months? We will decide. Think about a brand. And when you get that figured out, we will decide which package design to use. Rank order the information needed to make that decision. And write that down in regular speech, not in question format. Number 2, always do qualitative research first. There's nothing worse than a survey that's attempting to gather qualitative information. We need to talk to these people, figure out their words and phrases, what's important to them, etc. When you get to the point where you say, please select from the following list, which of the following is the most important reason? I'm in that situation a lot where I don't know what's on the list. Have you guys done any qualitative work first? And when they haven't, we're just making up stuff, and it's problematic. On a deeper level, I just have to say this, there's just so much stuff that we just don't, that only qualitative research can help us figure out. This is just a little table of qualitative and quantitative information needs, and I'm going to circle one of these. How do families decide what car to purchase? That's relevant because I have a question coming up. Okay. Remember this one? Or let's just look at this question. When determining which automobile to purchase, were you at least 50% involved in the research? Okay. And that had determining which automobile to purchase, the research, the decision maker. My gosh, if we had done qualitative work on this and we had really talked about it with each other, we would know what we were, what we really needed to go ask about in this survey, right? I think that's a really interesting thing because, the decision, gosh, we need a new car, gosh, when are we going to get one? Various ways of figuring things out. What is research anyway? Do I count asking 3 of my friends who drive Passats? I don't know. But this would be a lot easier if we'd done qualitative work first. Writing a questionnaire plan, I don't think this is a format for a questionnaire plan. I don't think this is as important to write it as it is to do it because it encourages us to talk to each other, figure things out. We start with the decisions, okay? So we know what we're going to do when this is done. Then we're talking with our clients about what information they need to make that decision, right? Or those decisions. And this is just written in everyday English. This is an example. And I'm just going to go down to message, or this is something where, let's say they're deciding about messages to use or edit. You'll see on the far left, message reception, find out whether customers are receiving our brand messages. That's what I'm talking to my client about. We'll write the questions later, okay? And over on the far right is, how we might analyze the data, okay? Okay, so I'm going to put those first 3 together because they are, I think this is like the first half of the golf swing. I mean, if you don't get this right, it's pretty hard from that point forward if you've ever played golf. And so critical because this is where I find, we get a much shorter questionnaire and we know what information we need and we're saving money. But we also need to know how to write questions. That matters too. So now I'm down to that part of what I call the framework. I'll talk about making questions clear. So, in the book, I've got this whole business of making questions clear. It's, here are 8 guidelines. We don't have time to go over all the guidelines, so I'm going to go through just a few examples. How frequently do you go to the grocery store? Fred says I go there once a week. That's pretty frequently, so I'll say frequently. Joe says I go there once a week. That isn't much, so I'll say infrequently. And one of the things I just don't like about that question is, first of all, I don't know what frequently means, neither do they. And then they have to go, okay, I go there once a week, now I have to translate that into a frequency number. So state the unit of measurement is really the guideline. And here's a question that's improved. In the past 30 days, how many times have you yourself gone to the grocery store? And then we know by labeling the response choice, number of times gone to the grocery store, we get better responses, okay? So that ends up being a lot easier for a respondent. Thinking of your typical depression patient, for what percent do you prescribe Prozac? Doctors don't know what a typical depression patient is. So use their vocabulary and their terms. And if I'm talking with a client, I'm going, what are we really after there? What do you mean by typical? Really working with our clients is like a qualitative exercise. Make questions answerable. There are a lot of questions that just aren't. Okay. Of the last 100 patients you've personally seen for weight control, how many are currently following the AHA exercise program? Well, the problem is the doctors don't know what 100 patients are doing. I see that all the time, and they don't know, So that encourages them to drop out, or they think your survey isn't very smart. So here's an improved question. Thinking of the last 10 patients you have personally saw, for how many of these did you recommend the AHA exercise program? So this is about, what are you recommending? And they know what they did. They don't know what their patients are doing, irregardless of what they did. Thinking of the past 12 months, how often have you baked a cake? Sarah bakes a cake 3 times a year. Birthday parties, does that mean 3 times a month? Jamie says I bake 1 or 2 cakes every month during the school year, none during the holidays. I'm not sure how to answer the question. This is don't assume regularity of behavior. There's so many things where we do, like buying vitamins, mowing the lawn, air travel. They just don't follow a regular pattern. And that can trip a respondent up. It seems so easy, but it's really not. So, that's why learning the keys to questionnaire writing is so critical. Do you regularly read the newspaper? Do you generally exercise in the morning? These are vague modifiers. Better to ask for a unit of measurement and give people a time frame they can answer. Make questions easy. Okay. Again, typical question. I've seen this 100 times. Which of the following best describes your mindset for the type of vehicle you're shopping for? That doesn't seem too bad, does it? What about asking it this way? Would you say you're shopping for a used vehicle? Used vehicle, but would consider a new vehicle? I don't like mindset. That's sort of throwing the person off. What are you really after? You want to know what they're shopping for? And then look at the response choices. You can just look at those and find your answer, right? So again, that makes the questionnaire shorter, easier to answer, more engaging. Make questions unbiased. I just left this in there because I just like this example. Will you finish your project on budget? This was given in a company where everybody said yeah. But to get sensitive information, consider disguising the question or shifting the focus away from the respondent. How about this? Do you foresee any circumstances that might prevent you from finishing your project on budget? And guess what? Everyone said, yeah, I foresee some circumstances. Now describe it. But the focus is now on circumstances, not you. Just a little trick of the trade. I'm always picking on the agree-disagree scale because there have been over 100 experiments on it, and it's been shown to produce a biased response. So I don't know why it still sticks around, other than it's just easy to write a bunch of things down and get them that way. So for the first one, and that's the only one I'm going to talk about just because I don't want to go over, our company values its people. Why not just measure the construct directly? How much do you think the company values its people? Not at all to a lot. just a direct measure of the construct. Scaling, you get your PhD in scaling, but I do want to say a few things about it. I call that the scaling toolbox. What do you really want to measure? Do you want a unipolar or bipolar? What about the length of the scale, midpoints, etc.? I just have like a bunch of scales that are, I don't know, I got a file where I have things written down. But at the top is a bipolar, on the bottom is a unipolar scale. I just want you to notice how it's worded. It's nice to just have those available when you're writing a questionnaire. You can churn them out pretty quickly. Notice how I didn't, in this case, give a person a midpoint where they could say neither comfortable nor uncomfortable, right? And then the interest scale, not interested to extremely interested. Interest is one of those things where I think it is kind of a unipolar scale. It's a little awkward to be completely disinterested in learning more about mushrooms or something like that. Back to the agree-disagree scale, I'm going to show you a good replacement for an agree-disagree scale. This question, please indicate the extent to which you agree or disagree with the following statements. I strive for perfection. I'm a confident person. I dress more fashionably than most people. Strongly disagree to agree. So when I work with people, I go, well, since the agree-disagree scale is known to have a positive bias, why don't we ask the question this way? Please indicate how well each of the following statements describes you personally. These are the same items. Does not describe me at all, describes me very well. I get 5 points of differentiation, which is nice. People like to talk about themselves. I think it's a more engaging question for people. And that's one of the ways in which you can replace an agree-disagree scale. There are many others. Here's another one I like to use. How well do the following statements describe each brand? Easy to use. I got 3 brands there. Here they're kind of rating the brands against each other, aren't they? So if I give brand A a 3, brand B, is that better or worse? But it's a real simple thing, as opposed to using the scale from 1 to 10, where 1 means this and 10 means this, and it goes on and on and on. You got this big grid. This ends up being easier to use. And you could do it on a smartphone. People call this bipolars, or I'm blanking on the other word. I better not run for president. For a lot of reasons. Okay, this is the pair of statements. Go back to that thing about buying the car, or that concept. So which of the following statements describes you better? I bought the car because I wanted it. I bought the car because I needed it. Which one describes you better? It's a very simple thing. It's not a 10-point scale. It's a 4-point scale. Okay, properly pretesting the questionnaire. Soapbox issue for me. I tell you, this is where, we wrote a questionnaire that we think is pretty darn good. But it is never really good until we take it through, real pretesting. This is where we, take the questionnaire, we talk to respondents, and we ask them to tell us in their own words what they think each question's asking, how they came up with their answers. What did the term own mean to you? I noticed you struggled with that, or you paused when you started to answer that question. So we're really exploring it with them in order to revise the questionnaire. Gordon Willis, who wrote a wonderful book on cognitive interviewing, has this table of probes. Comprehension, what did the term outpatient mean to you? Paraphrasing, repeat the question in your own words. Confidence, how sure are you about that? Well, I'm not really sure because, last month it was this month it was, you know what I mean? You start to find out where the holes are. And you can ask people, how would I ask that question? If I was trying to get this, how would I ask that question? It's so critical to do that. And I will tell you, if you can only do that with 1 or 2 people, you will improve your questionnaire immensely. And when I have people say we don't have time to do that, I do it anyway, because guess what? We're in and out of the field quicker. this is just one of my favorites. This is from the National Survey of, I think it's alcohol and drug use. So it was given to 15 and 16-year-olds. The question was, do you think young people who smoke cigarettes have more friends? And they had no problem understanding the question STEM, but when they pre-tested it, they asked them what they thought young people meant. Well, they don't think they're young. I mean, they're 15 and 16. Those are like 11-year-olds, right? Well, the question was intending to ask about people your age. So the question wasn't working. You know how much money goes into this survey to a national representative population? So, by really going through it and probing on some things, they found out what worked and what didn't work. So young people needed to be changed to people your age. I think that's how they changed it in the questionnaire. I thought the scale was interesting because if you look at that scale, probably not and definitely not meant that no, I don't think they have more friends. But these respondents thought that meant they had fewer friends. So there was something like the scale was technically right, but their interpretation of it was different. They thought if I said definitely not, that meant that they have much fewer friends. So, in any event, good thing they pre-tested it. Just a quick note on pre-testing. This is from Gordon Willis's second book. And just as an aside, he has promised his wife he will never write another book. So he was pre-testing this question where they used an agree-disagree scale. The second item, people had a lot of problem with other people. I eat more fruits and vegetables than other people. That really tripped them up. People in my family, people that I know, people in the office that I know well, what. I never hesitate to go out of my way to help someone in trouble. I help people in trouble. I've never stopped on the highway to help somebody who, whatever. So I can't say I never hesitate. Generally, I like sweet foods. Well, what could happen there? A couple of the respondents said, what about stuff with artificial sweeteners? Well, they didn't intend for the question to mean that. I have never intensely disliked anyone. It's a very strong statement, So it goes back to this issue of what do you really want to know? How can we ask the question to get a good measure? It's completely doable. Oh yeah, healthier life. I thought was interesting. I mean, what do you think people thought when they looked at the term healthier life? I mean, turns out they thought, if I recall correctly, it was about avoiding diseases and living longer. Just to sum it up and provide a little commentary, the point is that we can save a lot of money, 20, 30%, sometimes even more, get better data, make better decisions if we treat questionnaire design as a professional discipline. There's no magic bullet. I look in the industry and they want something that's innovative and new and emerging and da-da-da, but there's no real replacement. It's just like in athletics, there's no replacement for footwork, fitness, shot selection, that sort of thing. It's the fundamentals of writing good questionnaires. And we need to treat questionnaire design as a professional discipline. It's not enormously hard. It's not like calculus, but it can be done. We really need to talk to each other and to our respondents, get out of questionnaire design speak, and talk about what information we really need for the decisions, and talk to our respondents. We'll learn a lot. And these are the places in the framework where we do that, basically in discussion and doing qualitative work with our respondents before we design the questionnaire and before we send the questionnaire out. That is basically it. And if you have any questions, actually send the questions to you guys, right?
You can get good.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So if you ever have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me. I hope this was helpful to everyone. Thank you very much.